August 1st, 1943. The sun rises over the Libyan desert with the kind of heat that feels ancient. On a remote airstrip near Benghazi, 5 groups of B-24 liberators crouch in silence, engines dormant, crews waiting beside them. It is just past dawn when the order comes. Operation Tidal Wave is underway. Their target lies 1,000 miles away across the Mediterranean. The oil refineries of Ploesti, Romania, the very veins feeding Hitler's war machine. Every gallon of fuel that moves a tank or a plane in Europe comes from there. Destroy it, and the Nazi heart chokes. That was a promise. The men board their bombers in an almost sacred quiet. No grand speeches, no heroics, just routine motion under the enormity of fate. They know this mission's odds. They've seen the maps. They will fly low, dangerously low, under radar, across enemy territory, straight into what's known to be one of the most heavily defended industrial targets in the world. Many have folded small letters into their breast pockets to be delivered if the engines ignite with a thunder that shakes the sand. One by one, the bombers lift off, black dots rising into a white-hot sky. From above, the formation looks like a migrating storm. In the cockpit of one liberator, call sign Hell's Wager, 24-year-old Lieutenant James Jimmy McCune runs his gloved fingers across the instrument panel. His co-pilot cracks a nervous grin. "You ever think they named these things wrong?" he says. McCune just answers, "We'll see." Hours later, the formation crosses the Carpathians, the mountain peaks below cutting through morning mist like daggers. Then the first flak bursts appear, black blossoms against the blue. Romanian gunners have seen them coming. McCune's bomber shudders. A shell rips through the right wing, fuel spewing like silver smoke. Another hits the tail. The radio crackles with voices, panic, curses, prayers, but McCune keeps flying. The target is close now. Then the horizon turns black. Ahead lies Ploesti, a city on fire even before they arrive, smoke pillars clawing upward from earlier waves. The air smells of oil and cordite. The liberators descend to treetop height. Fields blur beneath them. Train tracks flash past, and the flak thickens until it's like flying through gravel. A gunner screams, "We're hit!" Another is already dead, but still the plane stays level. At 200 feet above ground, McCune makes his bombing run. Bomb bay doors open. The payload drops, but the explosions land just wide of the central tanks. Through the smoke, he can see it. The heart of the refinery still standing, white tanks gleaming through chaos. Over the intercom, a voice shouts, "We missed it! Jimmy! We're on fire! We've got to pull out." McCune glances at his co-pilot, then at the flames crawling along the right wing. He doesn't answer immediately. Somewhere deep inside the inferno sound, he decides, "We're going around again." The crew thinks he's lost his mind. Going around again means turning directly back to the flak, over the same guns that have already torn them open. The navigator yells, "We won't make it." McCune simply says, "Then we won't miss it either." He banks hard, the burning B-24 groaning like a dying animal. German gunners on the ground watch in disbelief. A bomber engulfed in flame, circling back as if defying death itself. The co-pilot fights the controls with him, sweat and smoke mixing into a single blur. Every second is a lifetime. Then, through the curtain of black smoke, Hell's Wager straightens. Bomb bay doors open one last time. The release switch clicks. The second wave of bombs falls perfectly into the refinery's core. The ground convulses. A roar louder than the sky itself rises. Oil tanks erupt, fireballs merging into a single inferno that lights the clouds red. For an instant, the burning B-24 seems suspended above its own explosion, like a phoenix made of steel. Then it breaks apart, wings folding, fuselage collapsing, disappearing into the flames it created. Nearby crews flying over the target witness it. One recalls later, it was like watching a man burn himself into the history books. By the time the surviving planes limp home across the Balkans, the sun has already dipped behind the mountains. Of the 177 bombers that left Benghazi, nearly half are gone. Hundreds of men are missing, captured, or dead. But the refinery at Ploesti, once the proud heart of Nazi fuel production, lies crippled. And somewhere beneath that smoke, among the wreckage of twisted metal and melted courage, lies the story of a man who refused to turn back, and whose final act of defiance set fire to the enemy's strength. In the days after the Ploesti raid, the sky over Romania still carried the smell of burning oil. The fires raged for weeks, thick black pillars twisting upward until they merged with the clouds, as if the earth itself were exhaling war. Allied reconnaissance photos taken days later showed what those men had given their lives for. The refinery fields of Ploesti, once an orderly maze of silver tanks, now a charred ocean of ruin. For the first time in the war, Hitler's fuel heart skipped a beat. But for the crews who returned to Benghazi, victory felt hollow. Of the 1,700 airmen who took off, more than 500 were gone. They came back in scattered groups, faced a streak with oil, some too shot to speak. When briefings resumed, their commanders praised a mission success. But in the mess halls, nobody called it that. Men sat in silence, their coffee cups shaking in their hands. They all knew someone who didn't come back, someone who had gone around again. The records of the raid would later note one B-24 that made a second pass and never returned. No gun camera film survived. No official photograph of McCune's bomber exists after that turn, but the testimonies remain, fragments stitched together from survivors who saw the impossible. One gunner said he thought the bomber was a comet alive with flame. Another, from a different formation, wrote in his diary that night, "He flew through hell to give us a chance." The consequences rippled far beyond the men who were there. With the refinery crippled, Axis fuel production plunged. The Luftwaffe, already bleeding pilots, found its tanks half empty in the months that followed. Panzer divisions rationed gasoline. By late 1944, fuel starvation would ground entire squadrons. Historians later traced the breaking point back to Ploesti, to that single morning when the air smelled of oil and iron and defiance. Years later, when survivors of the raid gathered for reunions, McCune's name always came up. Some spoke of him with reverence, others with a kind of haunted disbelief. He didn't have to go back, one said, but if he hadn't, maybe none of U.S. would have believed we could. It wasn't about orders or medals anymore. It was about the invisible bond that made men risk everything for the unseen hands flying beside them. The irony, quietly noted by one veteran decades later, was that the same fuel McCune died to destroy would one day power the planes that brought peace and prosperity. He burned the world's darkness, the old man said, so others could fly in its light. When the war ended, the ruins of Ploesti were left to rust. Romanian workers rebuilt what they could, but pieces of the past remained buried beneath layers of soot and silence. And yet, in the archives of both sides, the raid stood as a paradox, both a disaster and a triumph, a mission that cost too much and proved everything. By the 1980s, the few surviving members of McCune's crew, those who had transferred before that fatal flight, visited a memorial in Arlington. They brought with them a small metal fragment, twisted and scorched, found decades earlier in a Romanian field by a local farmer. It was said to have come from a B-24 engine. They placed it at the foot of the plaque and said nothing. Some moments in history don't need narration. Silence says enough. Today, the story of the B-24 that refused to turn back lives on in military academies, in documentaries, in the quiet awe of those who hear it for the first time. It is more than a war story. It is a study of conviction, of how far a human being can go once he decides that turning back is worse than dying. The camera lingers in the final moments on that same Romanian field, long reclaimed by grass. Sunlight glints off something buried, maybe metal, maybe memory. The wind stirs faintly, carrying the ghost of fuel and fire, and the narrator's voice fades to a whisper. He did not turn back. The fire outlasted the pilot, but so did the courage,